Food unites us. Food brings us together, particularly important during these times of division and strife around the world. Tout le monde aime la nourriture.
Everyone loves food. Food like poutine, tourtière, and the Lac Saint-Jean blueberries.
Food. And we all love Canadian food, like tourtière or like poutine, like Malpac oysters, maple syrup with pancakes and pea meal bacon. We all love butter tarts, although I'm treading on dangerous water here because we can get into a debate about whether they should be with raisins or without and who exactly makes the best butter tarts. But we all love Canadian food, whether it's Alberta barley-fed steak or it's Ontario corn-fed roast beef shared over a glass of Ontario or British Columbia wine. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to add my support for this bill in front of the House. I would like to thank the honourable member for Perth Wellington for sponsoring this bill in the House. It's been passed in the Senate, and I encourage all of my colleagues here in the House to support this bill. Food Day Canada started in 2003. Since then, it has been taking place on the Saturday of the August long weekend. This is the time of year when farmers' markets are brimming with many locally produced agricultural products, these products being freshly available, and patios and restaurants are full of patrons and barbecues are in high season. Food Day Canada is a celebration in praise of Canadian farmers and fishers, chefs and researchers, and home cooks. On this day, everyone is encouraged to celebrate, to shop, to cook, and dine Canadian. Food Day Canada's website contains numerous Canadian recipes that can be created using local Canadian ingredients, such as Saskatoon oat and seed bread, red lentil crusted albacore tuna with beluga lentil and cherry tomato vinaigrette, and apple and cider cobbler. Our country has so much to offer when it comes to authentic Canadian cuisine, and each Canadian recipe tells a story about who we are. On Food Day Canada, events take place across the country at various restaurants and locations. Buildings are also lit up red and white in celebration, including at Charlottetown City Hall, Montreal Tower, Toronto's CN Tower, the Alberta Legislative Building, and the Vancouver Convention Centre. It's a true coming together of agriculture, aquaculture, and the culinary communities of Canada. It's a day to shine a light on Canadian cuisine. Despite all of this, though, Mr. Speaker, Food Day Canada has not yet been designated a commemorative day in Canada. And passing the bill in front of the House today will formally recognize this day and the importance of Canadian cuisine to our culture, to our identity, and to our heritage. Food Day Canada was founded by the late Anita Stewart. I got to know Anita as a constituent in Elora, and before that, as the mother of sons I went to high school with at Centre Wellington District High School in Fergus, Ontario. I later got to know her as a passionate advocate for Canadian food. It's due to her vision, her dedication, and perseverance that Food Day Canada has become the national event that it is. Passing this bill honors the legacy of Anita Stewart and her contributions to Canadian cuisine. Anita Stewart founded Food Day Canada nearly 20 years ago. A member of the Order of Canada, founder of Cuisine Canada, and the University of Guelph's Food Laureate, she was an incredible advocate for Canadian food and Canadian farmers. Sadly, Anita was diagnosed with cancer and passed away in October of 2020. She was a food writer, a food journalist, and a self-described food activist. She was tireless in championing Canadian food, Canadian farmers, and Canadian cuisine. And she was always looking for a new recipe and connecting that to the farmers that produced the ingredients. She grew up in rural Wellington County, and from those rural roots, she went everywhere across this country. Anita went over the side of icebreakers into workboats in the North Pacific to visit every manned light station on that coast and met their keepers. She traveled by dog sled and snowmobile to Cree hunt camps in northern Quebec. She went to Hibernia, which she called the most easterly bastion of Canadian cuisine on this continent. She scuba dived with sea cucumbers and urchin in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and bushtail fly fished for salmon in Discovery Passage. She was an amazing storyteller about Canadian food, producing over a dozen Canadian cookbooks. One of her early works was co-written with Jo Marie Powers, titled Farmers Market Cookbook, and it featured recipes collected from vendors at farmers markets. Each recipe identified with the market and the vendor where the recipe came from. In her book, The Lighthouse Cookbook, Anita presented recipes from the keepers of British Columbia's lighthouses, including traditional clam chowder and mussels in wild mushrooms. Some other works by Anita include Country Inn Cookbook, the St. Lawrence Market Cookbook, and Northern Bounty, a celebration of Canadian cuisine. It was through her cookbooks that my wife Carrie and I further got to know Anita. When we were first planning our wedding, 20 years ago this month, we came across a cookbook titled Great Canadian Cuisine, The Contemporary Flavors of Canadian Pacific Hotels by Anita Stewart on Carrie's grandmother's coffee table. And one thing led to another. We met up with Anita, and her son, using that cookbook, prepared the most amazing wedding meal for all of the guests. Through her written works, Anita did more than share recipes. She brought to life the story of Canadian food and the people behind it. She was first, as many have mentioned, she was first as the University of Guelph's food laureate, believed to be the first at any university in Canada. As food laureate, she continued to champion Canadian cuisine, providing advocacy and leadership across academic and administrative departments. She had a profound impact on the University of Guelph and on Wellington County. The Anita Stewart Memorial Food Lab at the university continues to actively promote the growth and study of our Canadian food systems and cultures. In deep recognition of her contributions to Canadian cuisine and culture, she was invested into the Order of Canada in 2012, one of our country's highest honors. And just as Anita was passionate about Canadian cuisine, so too are her sons, and she passed along that passion to her sons, Jeff, Mark, Brad, and Paul. All four have had a great impact on Canadian cuisine and co-founded with her Food Day Canada. They also continue to serve on Food Day Canada's board of directors. Jeff, who is Red Seal certified as a chef and sommelier, previously stated the following about his mom, quote, "My mother was a real force in Canada, but also a real force in our family. The amazing thing is the legacy she left behind and all of the amazing connections of people who are supporting what she started." Following her all too early passing, Niagara Falls was lit up in red and white to honor her and her life's work. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that Canada is better for her contributions to Canadian cuisine. This bill in front of us honors the legacy Anita Stewart left behind. It will also ensure that Canadian cuisine from coast to coast is honored and celebrated each and every year. So I encourage all of my colleagues here in this House to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.